Story 1. Jaws solidified my fear of sharks for most of my childhood. Thankfully, I am now in the camp that sees them as peaceful sea creatures. Story 2. The original Halloween film. We had it on video cassette. Starting at about age 5, I would take the tape and put it into the video cassette recorder. I would have my finger ready to push it in and be ready to run away before I could see what was happening on the screen. Obviously, I never rewound it, so I never knew if it would be left at a scary scene. Based on the dialogue I heard while hiding behind the staircase, I would peek my head around the stairs and watch from about 30 feet away. Story 3. The Silence of the Lambs. I watched it when I was about 8 because my father wanted me to know that mentally ill people existed. I feel like there was a better way to teach that lesson. Story 4. Child's Play. When I was about 8 or 9. My mother thought it was hilarious that I was terrified. Robert the doll became my biggest fear after that. I knew he was coming for me. Story 5. Scary Movie. I think it was the third one and I was around 6 or 7. Then the movie that actually scared me the most is The Ring. I watched it when I was 12. Story 6. Does anyone remember the old Winnie the Pooh movies? At the end, the book containing the animated story would close as the camera slowly zoomed out. The ending music would pause, and in the darkness, the stuffed real-life Pooh would wink at you. Then the music would play loudly as the screen went completely black. That scared me a lot. I would rush to turn the TV off before he could wink. I bet I still would. Story 7. I'm surprised nobody has mentioned Fantasia. I forget how old I was, but Night on Bald Mountain terrified me as a child. Story 8. I don't even know how old I was, but I remember walking in while my dad was watching it. I know I was 5 or younger. It mortified me. Story 9. I do not remember being scared during the movie, but one of my earliest memories, maybe at 3 or 4 years old, was of Darth Vader cutting off my head with a circular saw. Story 10. Raiders of the Lost Ark. I was 4 years old in 1981 when it came out, and the ending with the Angels of Death scared me so much that I turned around in my seat so I could not see it. Story 11. My family went to see Ghostbusters at a drive-in when I was 4. Subsequently, I was terrified of demon dogs hiding behind every door in the house. Story 12. The People Under the Stairs. Age 4. It was playing in the video store, and by the time my parents realized what I was watching, I had seen enough to have it seared into my brain. I didn't know what movie it was until my early 20s when I saw a preview for it on a VHS tape and thought, wait, that's it. It's probably best if your 4-year-old doesn't see the Wes Craven film about kids trapped in a torture and murder house. Story 13. Edward Scissorhands gave me a very odd feeling. I wasn't sure if I liked it or was absolutely terrified by it. Story 14. I have been a big horror movie fan since I was very young, but the first movie that really scared me was The Sixth Sense. Story 15. The Polar Express. I remember being in preschool, and the movie was so hectic and noisy that it scared me. Story 16. The Ring. My mother knew it and used to put her hair down and crawl all weird with the television scratching in the background. Good times. Story 17. It was the terrestrial television premiere of Star Wars. I was maybe 6 years old. That scene in the trash compactor was too much for me. A monster under the water and the walls closing in. I noped out behind the sofa. Story 18. The claymation Cyclops was so bad that the sailor, when I was 6 years old, around 1958, my mom had to take me home. Story 19. Face Off. I cannot remember how old I was. I estimate between 7 and 10 years old. I dreamt that my parents were skinned alive and had to sleep on a mattress on their floor for a week. Story 20. The first traumatic experience I had with a movie was when Mufasa died in The Lion King. I swear that impacted me in a negative way. I also created a safety strategy for myself. As soon as I knew the part was coming up where he was about to die, I would go and do laps around our house on my bike to miss the scene where he dies. The innocence. Story 21. Saw the 1978 film Invasion of the Body Snatchers in the theater at 8 years old. Front row with a couple of friends. Nobody cared about the restricted rating for years where I grew up. Story 22. I don't remember my exact age, but it was early elementary school. It was one of two movies, but I don't remember which I saw first. Dark Crystal or The Never-Ending Story. Story 23. The original IT or Gremlins was around 6 to 7. I hated playing outside when it was bedsheet washing day. Story 24. The Grinch live action at age 5, just the part when he smiles at the camera. Also, the Grudge trailer with the little meowing blue boy gave me nightmares. Story 25. The Nightmare Before Christmas. I was probably around 6 to 8 when I watched it with my older sister. She really liked that movie, but it gave me real nightmares for months. Tim Burton movies in general always scared me as a kid. Story 26. Evil Dead. My brother was a teenager, and he and his friends rented it and were watching it in the living room. I went to the kitchen and saw the scene when Ash's sister first turns. The white eyes and that voice scared me a lot. I was around 8 or 9 years old. Story 27. The Vanishing. As a child, around 8 or 9 years old, I walked in while my father was watching the movie, right after the drink the coffee moment. If you know what happens next, then yes, a new fear was unlocked. Story 28. Ernest was scared stiff. When the child checks under the bed for a monster, then turns around, and the monster is in the bed. I had to sleep with my bed against the wall until I finished university. Story 29. Jeepers Creepers. After it came out, Dad rented it on a video home system. I was, I think, 5. I didn't sleep for months. Story 30. Scanners by David Cronenberg. It is not a movie for children, and I have never actually watched it. However, the posters were everywhere when I went on holiday to France at 6 years old, and they scared me a lot. Story 31. A Clockwork Orange. I think around 15 years old. I wouldn't say scared, but it disturbed me. Also Helter Skelter at 13. I was not so much scared of the movie, but scared that Charles Manson would get out on parole and come after me for some reason. Story 32. Ghostbusters. Could not handle those dogs at 5 years old. We walked out and watched Muppets Take Manhattan instead. Story 33. Green Slime 1968 scared me a lot when I was little. I found a copy recently, and it is laughable. The aliens wore rubber suits, and the special effects were cheesy. Story 34. My daughter at 4 had to go to sleep. Her sister, a friend of mine, and I stayed out to watch a movie together. She pretended to be asleep but sat on the stairs, watching the movie The Boy Through the Mirror. Then I heard a blood-curdling scream. That little girl had to sleep in my bed for weeks and would not go upstairs by herself. She thought there was an arm in our dresser drawer, but it was just a glove. To this day, at 15, she won't watch anything with a doll in it, and she has never owned one. Story 35. Saving Private Ryan at around 4 or 5 years old. My dad had gotten a new portable DVD player and thought it would keep me occupied on a long road trip. It backfired. Story 36. Dad took us to the cinema to see Jurassic Park when we were small kids because he wanted to watch it and Mom was not home. I was told I ran out of the cinema crying, but I do not remember it well. Story 37. Poltergeist. I think the scene shows a view down a hospital hallway, and suddenly the girl runs across the frame. I have no idea how old that movie is, but that scene stayed with me forever. Story 38. The Are You Afraid of the Dark episode with the dead ghost brother who drowned in the lake and came back saying, "I'm cold." No clue what age, but in the house I grew up in, to get to the bathroom from my bedroom, you had to walk past the stairwell with the landing. I guess one night I was still half dreaming because I saw the spooky ghost on the landing, like looking down from the window in the episode. I spent a good couple of years absolutely terrified to go downstairs at night unless all the lights were on. After searching, I found that episode aired in 1993, which would have made me 4 years old at the time. Story 39. Arachnophobia. I was about 5 years old at a sleepover, and someone thought that was an appropriate movie for kids to watch. Story 40. They were corny, but the Critters movies when I was about 7 terrified me. I couldn't sit on the toilet for a week, and I made my mom stay in the bathroom with me when I finally had to go because of that scene. Story 41. My parents will say Chucky, but for me personally, it would be Tremors. I would be playing in the yard and suddenly get scared, run as fast as I could, and jump onto the porch. This is probably why I did pretty well in the long jump during high school track. Story 42. My dad took us 4 kids to see Wait Until Dark in 1967 when it was first released. I was 9 years old. Story 43. I was around 9 or 10 years old and pretty sure I got scared by the movie The Grudge. Ironically, I am now a horror movie enthusiast. Story 44. 1408. Maybe around 7 or 8. It was the old man in the vents that got me. Estimated time of arrival. The movie Twister also scared me. I watched it on a road trip and was freaked out the whole time. I now have a phobia of weather. I don't know if it is connected, but it is embarrassing to be scared of at 23. Story 45. I think it was the Mickey Mouse Christmas Carol. I was 6 or 7, maybe. The funny thing is that the real Christmas Carol movies did not scare me at all, but the Mickey Mouse one did. Story 46. Silence of the Lambs. I was about age 9, watched it with my dad. My mum was out, came home, and was seriously upset. I have loved horror and scary movies ever since. Also, Nightmare on the 13th Floor stands out. In this case, I was the one who showed it to my younger sister. We both terrified each other. Story 47. The Brave Little Toaster, 1987. When I was 5, particularly the scene when the window air conditioning unit loses its temper and burns itself up. Story 48. Age 3 or 4. The part with the kitty in Allegro non troppo. Maybe not exactly terrifying, but your toddler now understands the impact of war. One of my earliest memories is telling my mom I cannot watch that part because it is too sad. I am now 40 and still cannot make it through the 6 minutes of animation. Story 49. Doom, the one with The Rock and Carl Urban. I had nightmares for years. It was the direct reason why I was afraid of the dark for a long time. Story 50. My parents took me to the theater to see Jaws when I was 5. I still cannot even be in my swimming pool in the late afternoon when the tree casts a shadow on the pool, making part of it darker. Honorable mention. Poltergeist. Story 51. Event Horizon. I was 9 years old, and after the first jump scare, I knew the rest of the movie was going to be tough. Story 52. Fantasia, including the scene with the devil on the mountain and some of the Mickey Mouse and Wizard scenes. How are those scenes appropriate to show children? Story 53. Resident Evil terrified me at about age 8. I was so scared of zombies for the rest of my childhood that I couldn't even handle Shaun of the Dead, a comedy, at 14. Story 54. The animated film The Hobbit aired in the 1970s. It was on television, and I was just walking by, not knowing anything about it. Orcs were yelling in caves, chasing children with weapons, accompanied by tense music. I was used to watching Captain Kangaroo and the Apple Dumpling Gang. Story 55. Gremlins. Age 5. Daycare forced us to watch it, and I got in trouble for refusing. I had nightmares until I was 12. Story 56. Coraline. If I remember correctly, it was especially the buttons for eyes scene. I think I was about 9 years old. I had nightmares for a long time after that. Story 57. The one that I still think about was actually a television movie called The Day After. Not The Day After Tomorrow. This one came out in 1983, and I was 12 years old. It was the height of the Cold War, and this was about a nuclear missile attack. It was a huge television event. Everyone watched it, and I had nightmares for years afterward. Story 58. Evolution, 2001. The scene where the alien insect is crawling under the man's skin and they remove it through his buttocks frightened me as a child. Also, the giant flesh blob amoeba creature at the end. Story 59. I'm 48, so I'm the exact age to have been traumatized by a nightmare on Elm Street. Not sure exactly how old I was, but it was new to home video. Story 60. Tarzan. I was about 3 or 4 years old when I saw it for the first time, and let me tell you, it was the first Disney movie to truly frighten me. Story 61. I was 6 years old, and I was supposed to be in bed, but instead I went into the living room while my mother was watching a television program. Caused major nightmares. My mother handed me my first Stephen King book when I was 10, but I did not work up the nerve to read it until I was 16 or 17. Story 62. It came from Planet 9 at 8 years old. Saturday morning triple matinee with my next-door neighbor. I am 68 now. Story 63. Chucky. My older sister is a horror movie enthusiast and forced me to watch many when I was a kid. I was terrified of Chucky until I was at least 13. Story 64. I feel very awkward. Everyone is talking about genuinely scary movies. Mine is Beauty and the Beast. I do not know how old I was, but I was very small, maybe 3 or 4. The scene where he discovers Belle with the rose was very scary to little me, with his angry face and the lightning behind him. Story 65. I was 10 years old when my dad took me to watch Aliens. I remember standing outside the theater door, listening for the screaming to stop so I could go back in. That movie scared me a lot. I had also watched both Jason and Freddy when I was even younger, but they never scared me at all. Story 66. I made the mistake of watching The Hills Have Eyes when I was 8 or 9. I turned it off after the scene where the mutants attacked the family in their camper. Story 67. That Sewage Clown movie and Elm Street. I was in elementary school, I think. I had recurring nightmares featuring these two characters well into my 20s. Story 68. The Haunting. I was 8 years old when my parents took me to see it at the movies. I don't think I had ever really watched a horror movie before then, at least not that I can remember. I was so scared that I was crying on my mother's lap. Story 69. Poltergeist. I was way too young, like 6 or so. I watched it at my neighbor's house with my friends. I couldn't even finish it. I ran home and couldn't tell my mom because she would have freaked out and never let me go back. Story 70. The Exorcist. I was 9. It was the evening the first snow fell that winter. I couldn't sleep on my own for about 4 months. I remember walking around thinking, when will it end? When will I stop being afraid of this? I was Christian for that amount of time just for safety, completely driven by my own narcissistic agenda, just in case demons and Satan were actually characters I would stumble upon. I watched it last year in protest because it still scared me to see that girl. The movie was a laugh. Nothing to be afraid of. You have no power here. I've since watched all the scary movies I can and love the genre now. I'm untouchable. If you have a tip, give it over. Story 71. When I was a kid, I was terrified of everything. My dad is a big horror fan and was just watching The Blob when 5-year-old me walked in right as a man was getting sucked into a tiny drain. During nap time at school, I used to imagine the Blob oozing out of the ceiling. Luckily, I have grown up and now love everything horror and gory. Story 72. Old Yeller. 1960. 6 years old. I was traumatized for years. Many years later, my daughter had to read it for school. I always read everything they were assigned, but I balked at that one. Finally, I told myself it was just a book and I could handle it. I opened the book to a random page. I put the gun to his head and pulled the trigger. Nope, nope, nope. Story 73. Aliens. 1987. In a dark room with several adults smoking a lot of marijuana, and me being afraid of spiders and still under 10 years old. Not a good combination. Story 74. The Ring is a movie I watched when I was 7 years old. It scared me, especially the last part where Samara crawls out of the television. Story 75. RoboCop 1987. Murphy's death seen and censored. I was scarred for a good portion of my life. Now I love that scene and adore that movie. Story 76. Little Nemo. Not Find Nemo. Is the nightmare stronger than Donald Bluth and Jim Henson? Pajama. Pajama. Story 77. Children of the Corn 1985. 9 years old. Particularly the Malachi He Wants You To scene. Oh my gosh. Did that give me nightmares? The name Malachi to this day still creeps me out. Story 78. The Blob at age 8 taught me not to poke things with sticks and put me off jelly for ages. It well and truly scared the life out of me. Story 79. Fire in the Sky when I was 11. I was so frightened I tried to climb into bed with my mother, but she would not let me, so I went and slept with my little brother. I regularly watched horror movies, but something about that particular movie got under my skin. I am 43 now and I still cannot watch it. Story 80, The Blair Witch Project. I was about 24, I think. It was the first horror movie I saw in the theater, and I had my hands over my eyes about half the time. Story 81. I think I am a bit older than the average poster here. I do not know the name of this movie, but I was less than 10 years old, and we were renting a house or cottage where a murder had occurred. The murderer was a hypnotist who hypnotized beautiful women to disfigure themselves so his women could get acting jobs. Something along those lines. One woman he convinced to stick her face into a fan, one to step into a scalding shower, and one with acid, perhaps. I think I have posted about this before, but never found a conclusive answer. I think it might be called The Hypnotic Eye. This would have been probably in the 1960s. I associate the tagline psychopath. If tonight you kill, tomorrow you will, with a movie from around the same time, but I do not think it is the same one. Story 82. Silence of the Lambs at 3 or maybe 4. The scene where he danced naked. I was so confused and scared, and my parents thought it was hilarious. It was all downhill from there. By the time I was 6, I was watching full-on horror and gore. My favorite was a Dutch one because that is my language, and I was too young to read subtitles. I only had nightmares once, after watching RoboCop. That scene where the robot walks into the boardroom and shoots everyone. I do not know why that one affected me so badly. I was into all that stuff until I had to get a cesarean section and could see them performing the surgery in the mirrors on the lamps. Staring right into my open belly was wild. It messed me up. I got queasy and fainted and kept losing consciousness for the next 2 hours, apparently a common side effect from the medication they put in my spine to numb my lower half. Ever since, I am not very good with the sight of blood. I guess it is some kind of mild post-traumatic stress disorder. Story 83. I was 6 or 7 years old when my brother decided we should watch one of the Terminator movies before bed. I do not remember the movie. I am not even sure if they are scary. I am in my mid-30s and have never watched a Terminator movie. Story 84. I was 12 when a friend's mother rented Nightmare on Elm Street for all of us kids to watch at a slumber party. It scared me half to death, and I had nightmares about it on and off for years. So, thanks for that, Mrs. N. Story 85. The first live-action Scooby-Doo. I saw it in the theater and must have been about 6 years old when it came out. I had nightmares for years afterward about everyone around me being mind-controlled. Story 86. I can't remember the exact age, but it was Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, the part where the candy man with the huge nose would drive around looking to steal the children. Story 87. The Gate, released in 1987 when I was perhaps 8 or 9 years old. That scene with the hands jumping out from under the bed was terrifying. That eye in the hand was nothing compared to that. Story 88. Hindi film titled Makti. Any Indian brothers and sisters on this thread who were born in the 1990s, you know exactly what I am talking about. Story 89. Age 5 or 6. Trifecta of Star Trek, the motion picture, The Black Hole, and Flash Gordon. Loved them all but was also terrified of certain scenes. Dad used to pick me up from school to go see a movie occasionally. Treasured memories. Story 90. It was Jaws. I remember sneaking out of bed to see what my mom and dad were watching. When I saw the woman get eaten at the beginning with that eerie tune, it ruined me. I thought it was real. Story 91. Pet Sematary, specifically the scene with the sister Zelda. I was little, I don't know how old I was, when my older sisters made me watch it, and it disturbed me for a very long time afterward. Story 92. Blair Witch. I was 8 when it came out, and I secretly watched it after my older brother rented it on VHS. It really scared me. Story 93. The original Child's Play. I somehow ended up seeing it when I was 6, and it scared me. Edited to add. The first movie that broke my young heart was An American Tale. Story 94. Harry Potter 1. At age 6 to 7. That unicorn killer was a feature in my nightmares for a long time. And yes, I am still not a fan of anything scary, but I did grow up to be a Potterhead. Story 95. I watched the first Lord of the Rings movie, especially the war scenes at the beginning when I was 9 or 10 years old, but it was not too bad. I also saw Ultimate Note, I think that is the English title, when I was 10 or 11 years old, and remembered certain scenes. Story 96. The Ring. Static screens were common between channels back then. Every time I woke up to static, I was terrified. For context, a television program ending late at night with no scheduled next program would usually result in static for a few minutes or longer. I was probably 6 or 7. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.